Today, you will be reading a passage from the Bible book Solomon and a part of chapter 34 from Unwind that you read on Tuesday. First, we will read on the left-hand side the Solomon story from 1 Kings. Then 2 women who were harlots came to the king and stood before him. The one woman said, "O my lord, this woman and I live in the same house, and I gave birth to a child while she was in the house. It happened on the 3rd day after I gave birth that this woman also gave birth to a child, and we were together. There was no stranger with us in the house, only the 2 of us in the house. This woman's son died in the night because she lay on it. So she arose in the middle of the night and took my son from beside me while your maidservant slept and laid him in her bosom, and laid her dead son in my bosom. When I rose in the morning to nurse my son, behold, he was dead. But when I looked at him carefully in the morning, behold, he was not my son whom I had borne." Then the other woman said, "No, for the living son is my son, and the dead one is your son." But the first woman said, "No, for the dead one is your son, and the living one is my son." Thus they spoke before the king. Then the king said, "The one says, 'This is my son who is living, and your son is the dead one.' And the other says, 'No, for your son is the dead one, and my son is the living one.'" The king said, "Get me a sword." So they brought a sword before the king. The king said, "Divide the living child in 2, and give half to the one and half to the other." Then the woman whose child was the living one spoke to the king, for she was deeply stirred over her son, and said, "O my lord, give her the living child, and by no means kill him." But the other said, "He shall be neither mine nor yours. Divide him." Then the king said, "Give the first woman the living child, and by no means kill him. She is his mother." When all Israel heard of the judgment by which the king had handed down, they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice. Now on the right-hand side, this is a portion of chapter 34, where the admiral is talking to Connor about the Heartland War. The admiral gives Connor that scrutinizing look he's so good at. "How much do you know about the Heartland War?" No one wants to remember how it really was. "You asked which side I was on?" The truth is, there were 3 sides in the war, not 2. There was the Life Army, the Choice Brigade, and the remains of the American military, whose job it was to keep the other 2 sides from killing each other. That's the side I was on. Unfortunately, we weren't very successful. You see, a conflict always begins with an issue, a difference of opinion, an argument. By the time it turns into a war, the issue doesn't matter anymore, because now it's about one thing and one thing only: how much each side hates each other. I was right there in the room when they came up with the idea that a pregnancy could be terminated retroactively once a child reaches the age of reason, says the admiral. At first it was a joke. No one intended it to be taken seriously. But that same year, the Nobel Prize went to a scientist who perfected neurografting, the technique that allows every part of a donor to be used in transplant. The admiral takes a deep gulp of his coffee. "But the war getting worse," said the admiral. "We brokered a peace by bringing both sides to the table. Then we proposed the idea of unwinding, which would terminate unwanteds without actually ending their lives. We thought it would shock both sides into seeing reason. They would stare at each other across the table, and someone would blink. But nobody blinked. The choice to terminate without ending life, it satisfied the needs of both sides. The Bill of Life was signed, the Unwind Accord went into effect, and the war was over. Everyone was so happy to end the war, no one cared about the consequences." One of your standards is to analyze how modern stories use similar themes and characters from old myths, Bible stories, etc. Stories are passed down through the ages and revamped to be put in modern day. Read the passage from the Book of Solomon in the Bible and compare it to this part of the Unwind novel. Answer the questions below. Make sure to write one quality paragraph using complete sentences. To look back at the texts and type, click Show Instructions. How are the characters similar? How are they different? How do the plots parallel each other? Number 2. How does this modern work of fiction draw on a similar theme from the king's decision in the Book of Solomon in the Bible?